What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the BnG podcast, episode 109. And before we get too deep into this episode, if you're checking us out on YouTube, be sure to like, be sure to comment, be sure to subscribe. On the road to 1,200 subscribers. And if you're already subscribed, be sure to hit that membership button. Become a member of the BnG Mafia. Like I said, we have a lot of giveaways coming out because this is the off season and it's our time to shine. That's all we know is shining in the off season is watching the Commander football team or Redskin fans, because I haven't seen the victory years in my 28 years of life. But to give you a timestamp as we do for all of our episodes, today is Monday, January the 8th, and it's about 6:30, and we're about, 10 hours removed from a big bomb being dropped by multiple NFL insiders, pause, Adam Schefter, Ian Rappaport, Tom Pelissero, among others, that the Washington Commanders have officially fired Ronald Eugene Rivera, Paddleboat Ron, as we have affectionately coined him for the last couple of years, ending the Ron Rivera era. But that wasn't the only piece of news at all that has had the Commanders' name being tied to it throughout the day. The Commanders have been at the epicenter of the NFL news throughout the day. So we're just going to touch on the basis of how the day is laid out, touch on some things that we might be seeing in the near future, some predictions, and recap the Ron Rivera era. So I don't plan to keep you guys too long. As I mentioned, this was the end of the Ron Rivera era. I think the announcement was announced around 8:30 p.m. today. So right before I was supposed to start getting work done. So guess what? I didn't do anything productive at work today. And immediately within the same minute of the announcing of the Ron Rivera Fired, there was announcing that Josh Harris has been in the kitchen cooking up, guys. Josh Harris has clearly been working behind the scenes. Josh Harris is in his big bag. Josh Harris is standing on business. Josh Harris is doing whatever it takes to get this franchise to the success that I haven't seen, like I said, in my 28 years, and the victory days and the glory days of the 90s and the 80s in the past. And what I mean by that is within the same minute of Adam Schefter and all those guys announcing the Ron Rivera firing, Adrian Wojnarowski, who's an NBA insider, drops a Woj bomb. He's known for his Woj bomb. He drops another Woj bomb today regarding the Washington Commanders. And that Woj bomb was that Josh Harris, our managing partner, has not only hired Bob Myers, former GM and former executive vice president of the Golden State Warriors, a four-time champion of Golden State Warriors, a four-time champion in himself, Bob Myers. He not only hired Bob Myers, but he hired former Minnesota Viking GM Rick Spielman to head his, to guide him and head his search as he looks for. And he specifically named two titles. So I know that we were talking about there might be an executive vice president and things like that. He said he wanted to fill two roles specifically. He didn't say which roles, so I don't know. We know one of those roles is a coach. We know one of those roles is a head coach. So I don't know if he's going to give the head of his football operations the executive vice president title or he's going to give him the GM title. But in his announcement of the Ron Rivera firing and, his plans to move forward, he specifically stated that he wanted to fill two positions, and that's why he hired this team to help him in this search and in this journey. And there's a couple things that I wanted to touch on specifically with these hires and specifically with these guys. Bob Myers is a guy that has NBA ties. Not surprising with Josh Harris being the owner of an NBA franchise in the Philadelphia 76ers. But you can't help but wonder, and it's only 4%, right? And I'm not saying that this guy's walking around dragging his nuts and holding the big shoes or anything like that. But you can't help but wonder if this is what the Magic Johnson effect does, right? Bob Myers has NBA ties. Josh Harris has NBA ties. And I think that there's reports going out that they go back. Oh, no. That was with Bob Myers and somebody that I'll be mentioning in the next couple of minutes. But, they do have NBA ties. But as I mentioned, is this the Magic effect? Are we finally getting our first remnants of the Magic effect, where I believe that that Magic Johnson and Bob Myers have had a pretty good working relationship in the NFL from everything that I've read today. And, they've been over there on the West Side, West Coast, managing, not only the Dodgers, not only the Lakers in Magic Johnson's case, but also in Bob Myers' case, managing the Golden State Warriors as well. So they've been over there on the West Coast. You know, the NBA circles are intertwined just like all NFL circles. So I'm pretty sure that they know each other. And Magic is the type of guy to have this cachet. And I've seen a lot of guys and a lot of women in the Washington Commander community acting like, or just questioning. I'm not going to put any labels on you guys. But you guys were questioning, like, why would Josh Harris go with a basketball guy to help him with some football hires? Don't look at it that way. Look at it this way. Why would Josh Harris hire one of the most successful general managers of the last 20 years, regardless of sports, to come in and set a culture and to reset an organization anew? Because that's exactly what Bob Myers did with the Golden State Warriors. Yeah, the Golden State Warriors have a lot of cachet at this present moment in 2024. Do you guys remember where the Golden State Warriors were in 2005? In 2009? Even when Steph Curry got there at the beginning of it, the Golden State Warriors weren't no big name NBA franchise. But they got Bob Myers there. He drafted well, drafting Stephen Curry, drafting Draymond Green, drafting Klay Thompson, and he set a culture for a franchise that was able to win 4 championships in the last decade. So don't look at it as, why is this an NBA hire coming, or why is he hiring some guys with NBA ties to help them with the NFL hire? Look at it that way. Why is he hiring one of the most successful culture setters in franchise sports in the last couple of decades to help him ultimately set this franchise anew and wipe this slate clean and rejuvenate this franchise, something that we desperately need. If you listen to Josh Harris in his press conference, he said that Bob Myers was not only going to help him through this search, but he was going to help him through, not only going to help him with the search, but he was going to help him out through, help him through the search as well. Now, what does that entail? I'm not necessarily sure, but he was specific in saying that while Rick Spielman might not necessarily help him after the search, Bob Myers will. So he's going to just be simply there advising Josh Harris to simply reset that culture. And that's one of the reasons why I was particularly excited about the Bob Myers move. The Rick Spielman move, I know that Rick Spielman has won Executive of the Year. I know that Rick Spielman have drafted some fucking dogs in Adrian Peterson, Percy Harvin, Sidney Rice. But I know that Rick Spielman has whiffed on his fair share of quarterbacks as well, and I think that's the reason why he isn't in Minnesota anymore. But when you look at the reports coming out that Josh Harris wants a model from, or a model that reflects from, different sports and not just the NFL and not just football, this is the model that I see hiring a lot of multiple people, not necessarily a search firm, but a search team to help him deploy roles, deploy duties. And I think that that's just simply what Rick Spielman has come here to do. Bob Myers and Josh Harris don't necessarily have football ties, and that's where Rick Spielman comes to play. He mentioned that he's known Rick Spielman for a while, and we're not saying that Rick Spielman is some holy grail executive or anything like that, but he's drafted some talent, and we haven't seen talent drafted here in the last 4 years under the Ron Rivera era. And that's why I was particularly excited about that, those two hirings. And if you notice Rick Spielman's Twitter, because he's somebody that still has been working in the league circles, he's been doing a lot of pre-draft evaluation. He has high regards for all of the top 3 quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels. So it'll be interesting to see if he works or if he's working with the team throughout the search into the draft as well. But just to recap some of the Ron Rivera era, never want to see a guy lose his job. But ultimately, as I touched in episode 108 of the podcast, it was time for Ron to go. I told y'all we spotted this bullshit a while ago. We coined him the term Paddleboat Ron in 2021 in just his second year. A lot of people were blinded and had their burgundy-coated lenses on because of the fact that we made the playoffs in the 2020 season with a 7-9 record. I never lost track of the fact that we won with a losing record. And ultimately, Ron's best record here was last season, the 2022 season, where he went 8-1. So that's as mid as it gets. That's literally 500. Was Ron Rivera's career record, now falling one game under 500 with our loss to the Dallas Cowboys yesterday. So Ron Rivera is essentially as mid as it gets. So you never want to see a guy lose his job, but when you're spending $6 billion on an entity, you can't pay for mid. And I see that Josh Harris isn't going to settle for mid, and I love to see it. But ultimately, the Ron Rivera era was encapsulated by the fact that you never had a quarterback. I do think that he changed somewhat of the culture off of the field. I don't necessarily think that the culture was changed that much on the field. I see a lot of people still lollygagging in between plays. He just told you that players were complaining about Eric Bieniemy's demands at the beginning of this season. So how much did the culture change? Now, I know that you drafted a lot of choir boys, but Ron Rivera still had his trainer rated by the DEA, right? So how much did the culture necessarily change? I will admit that it changed a little bit, but was that because of Ron Rivera, or was that simply because of the fact that Dan Snyder went from being more so hands-off with all these sexual assault lawsuits and practically not touching the team for the last couple of years and then ultimately selling it? Is that the reason that the culture started to change, because we didn't have that dark cloud over it? And were we giving Ron Rivera essentially too much credit? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Ron is an amazing man, though. I was fortunate enough to meet him in training camp a couple of times. And he's very personable, great communicator. So like I said, when you think of the person, you never want to see that guy lose his jobs. But if I saw them arms being fucking folded one more time with no type of emotion while my team losing by 30 points, I was going to lose my shit. And I feel like Josh Harris was going to lose his shit today. Was going to lose his shit as well. Because he told y'all today he was sweating those losses just like we were as fans. He did not enjoy those losses. No matter how many times you want to talk about how he looked like he was partying in the boxes, he let you know today. Hey, Josh Harris is a bad man. And it seems like he's let go of some of that nervousness and that jitty-earness, if that's a word. Is jitty-earness a word? I don't know, but we're going to make it a word today over here at Bleeding BnG. He seemed to let go of that, some of that anxiousness that he had when he first brought the team. Because, like I said, he was standing on business in his presser today. He was answering questions. He wasn't necessarily dodging many questions. There were some things that he didn't necessarily want to go into, which I understand. When you're about to run a confidential search for, your potential next two biggest hires in your organization and your first hires, right? This is one of the biggest reasons why this is one of the biggest moves that Josh Harris can make, no matter how long he's the owner of the Washington Commanders, is because you only get one time to make your first. You only get one time to have your first. So he only has one time to hire his first EVP, general manager, and he only has one time to hire his first head coach. You only have one time to make a first impression. And that's the time that you have, the opportunity that you have to make that first impression. And I think that Josh Harris is looking to make a strong first impression. And the reason that I say that is because look at some of the names that we have been linked to already requesting access for, not only for the GM executive vice president role, but for the head coach as well. And it's some heavy hitters. It is. And I'm not just here to sell you some dreams and sell you some Ashburn syndrome bullshit. It really is some. If you know anything about the NFL, it really is some heavy hitters. They've already requested to interview Adam Peters from San Francisco 49ers, one of the best franchises in the NFL. Ian Cunningham from the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the best franchises in the NFL. Alex Hallaby from the Philadelphia Eagles, one of the best franchises in the NFL. Mike Bergonzi from the Kansas City Chiefs, again, one of the best franchises in the NFL. And Glenn Click from the Cleveland Browns. I wouldn't necessarily say they're one of the best franchises, but they're on the come up. They're definitely on the come up. One of the most storied franchises in the NFL. And these are all guys that have impeccable track records. Not many blemishes, to say the least. And one thing that I actually found interesting is that a lot of these guys were linked, and when they were mentioning them with the leaks coming out from Schefter, Rappaport, Palacero, a lot of them were saying that we were interviewing them these guys for the GM title. But I forgot who it was, and forgive me because I wanted to properly credit you. But one name in particular, Adam Peters. Whoever it was that broke the news that we requested access to interview Adam Peters from the San Francisco 49ers, and that the access was granted and that he's accepting the interview. And I think that we're going to be interviewing him within the next couple of days while the San Francisco 49ers are on their bye. They mentioned that Adam Peters would be being brought in the EVP, Executive Vice President of Football Operations role. And that's important. That's an important bit of information as opposed to the other candidates that I named. And they were just mentioned as, being GM candidates. And the reason that's important for Adam Peters is that Adam Peters is somebody that a lot of franchises have been trying to pry away from San Francisco for a while. But he's always been, second fiddle to John Lynch. And now John Lynch has the executive vice president role in San Francisco. And a lot of people believe that was opening up the door to give Adam Peters the lead GM role over there in San Francisco. So for the Commanders to be offering the same title that John Lynch just got promoted to John Lynch's little man. Because if you listen to a lot of people in NFL circles, Adam Peters is the reason why that 49ers roster is constructed the way it is and so fucking elite from top to bottom. He's the one doing the elbow work. He's the one doing the behind the scenes work. And John Lynch is just the name, Hall of Fame player and things like that. So for Washington to be offering Adam Peters the same role that John Lynch just got promoted to, in hopes with the San Francisco 49ers, hoping that Adam Peters could just fill in John Lynch's previous role as the lead GM. That was a shrewd move by Washington. And something that I'm not used to my organization playing chess, but it looks like Mark I, Mitchell Rails, Josh Harris, and Magic Johnson got all the kings out. And it got all the pawns out. And I love to see it. And when you've been dealing with dudes that couldn't play checkers, let alone connect four, and Daniel Snyder, Ron Rivera, Vinny Serrato, the list goes on and on. Just seeing guys simply willing to play chess is exciting to see. And then we were linked to a couple of head coaches as well. We were linked to both of the coordinators, the offensive and defensive coordinators from the Detroit Lions. We've been banging the table for Ben Johnson. He's probably our number one choice. And he's the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. But we also have requested access to interview their defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, as well. If you guys watch Hard Knocks during the 2022 season, you guys are familiar with Aaron Glenn. He's a fiery guy. Detroit's defense didn't necessarily excel when you take a step back and look at the entire picture, but he's getting a lot out of the marginal talent that they have over there on the defensive end. And if you noticed him in Hard Knocks, he was a guy that was energetic. He seems like a player coach, and that was something that sparked my interest as well. And they also have requested to interview Anthony Weaver, who is the D-line coach and the associate head coach from the Baltimore Ravens. One of the best franchises in the NFL. So it seems like we're just going to be plucking from all the multiple franchises in the NFL with this different front office model that Josh Harris wants to, exude over here in Washington. And I'm excited for it. The reason, we've been stamping Ben Johnson as our number one. And I would hate to just simply give them the tag. But I think that Josh Harris is ready to move fast, because simply interviewing Aaron Glenn and Anthony Weaver, who are two minority candidates, that simply meets your Rooney Rule obligations. And I would hate to just give them the label of just Rooney Rule hires or Rooney Rule interviews, because I don't think that that's the case. I think that we're really going to be doing thorough, investigating and thorough interviewing and have a thorough hiring process. So I don't think that we're going to have any just simply Rooney Rule hires, but interviewing these two minorities outside of your franchise automatically allows you to meet your Rooney Rule obligations, and that automatically allows you to hire whoever you're going to ultimately hire as a head coach, because you have to meet those Rooney Rule obligations before you come up with an official head coach. As I mentioned before, though, Ben Johnson's our number one. You see, he has the Detroit Lions offense going up and down the field. He's been our number one for a while. You've heard us talk about him on this podcast multiple times. And then there was another name that was dropped by Tony Pauline yesterday. And then I think that Tom Pelissero actually linked this name to us today after the news that Ron Rivera was fired as well. And that's the head ball coach over there at the University of Michigan. Matter of fact, I think he got a championship game to play in less than an hour. And that's Jim Harbaugh. And that's that the Commanders have been reached out to Bob Myers, actually, in particular, has reached out to Jim Harbaugh's agent to gauge his interest in the NFL. And I think that this is one of the reasons why, Josh Harris goes out and get an NBA guy in Bob Myers. And Bob Myers was a sports agent. Bob Myers also has a relationship with Adam Peters. They went to high school together. They went to UCLA together. And I think that's why he was willing to give Adam Peters the EVP role over the other guys that they just simply want to interview as GM candidates. Let alone it being a shrewd move to try to shake up that power dynamic over there in one of the best franchises in the NFC with the San Francisco 49ers. So man, I'm excited. Like I told you guys yesterday, like I've been telling you guys for the last couple of weeks, the offseason is the playoffs for the Washington Commanders. It's been that way all my life, and I don't expect 2024 to be any different. $74 million in cap space, could easily get the $90 million with a couple of cuts, the number 2 draft pick, and it seems like we're going to have the fucking Avengers in the front office. So it's only a matter of time. If we make these right hires, and with those 5 GM candidates and EVP candidates, and a couple of those head coaching candidates that I mentioned that we've already requested to speak to, if we make a couple of these hires, we'll be winning the Super Bowl by 2027. Mark my words. And then we'll send it to Ron Rivera like he asked. He said, send him his ring. We'll send it to him in 2027. Send him a ring pop. Send him a burgundy and gold ring pop. But ultimately, man, like I said, I love Ron the guy. But there was too many mistakes that he made. Going with a defensive end that turned out to be a bust in hindsight. And Chase Young, yes, he was the perfect prospect. But you didn't have an answer at quarterback. And when you're drafting the top 3 in the draft like we were in the 2020 draft, you gotta shoot your load. You gotta shoot your load trying to get a quarterback. You have to. Whether that be Tua. And you say, oh, Tua had nobody had Chase Young, nobody had Justin Herbert over Chase Young going into the that's true. But guess what? Hopefully we have hired somebody with the foresight to know that you take as many bites at the apple at the quarterback position and not draft a DN when you have drafted 3 other defensive linemen in the previous 3 first rounds. Let alone that DN turns out to be a fucking bust. Let's not make that same mistake again and think that we need a left tackle because Sam Howell is the answer. Because he's clearly not. So let's not make the same mistake in 2024 that we made in 2020. That Ron Rivera made in 2020. So that was ultimately his biggest mistake. And then just simply that he couldn't find it. He couldn't ever solidify the quarterback position. And that's something that he honestly hasn't been able to do since before Cam Newton's prime and since he left his prime. So the quarterback position just be having Ron flustered as shit. I've just come to that conclusion. Giving Brian Fitzpatrick the keys in 2021 was never the answer. Oh, water slide Fitzpatrick busted his hip up in the first quarter. Telling Trent Williams that he has to prove it to you. Has he proved it since? Letting Dan Snyder tell you that you got to give. And you got to listen to the demands of your owner. But listen to this, guys. We let 2 games from Dwayne Haskins in 2019 made us not even look at the 2020 quarterbacks in the draft. So listen to that. So if you let 2 games solidify your opinion on your quarterback position, Sam Howell would have been fucking Peyton Manning this year. Sam Howell would have looked like Tom Brady after the Eagles and the Patriots game. Let alone the Seahawks game. Shit, he had 3. We were so tired. The 2 games from Dwayne Haskins where he showed some flashes. They weren't all pro performances by any means. And I'm not bashing Dwayne by any means. Rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins. By any means. But just listen to that. We let 2 decent performances where our first round quarterback showed some flashes. Allow us to not even look at Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert. If we did that in 2024, with that 3-game sample from Sam Howell against the Eagles, the Patriots, and the Seahawks, shit, we would have thought that fucking Sam Howell was Tom Brady. He was going down the Tom Brady career path. So let us not make that mistake again, because that's ultimately the mistake that bit Ron Rivera in the ass, let alone the minor mistakes like letting Landon Collins tell you he's not going to play linebacker, but he's getting bombs over Baghdad's dropped over him week after week after week at safety. Or giving old dust-up Jack time after time after time when his defense got cooked in the 2021 season. When it reared its ugly head when he faced the few elite quarterbacks that we did in the 2021 season. So those are some of the few mistakes that we came across in the Ron Rivera era. Guess what? It's a brighter day. It's a bright day. And if we make some of these hires that I mentioned throughout this episode, as I told you, I'm not speaking in hyperbole. I'm not exaggerating it. Washington Commanders will be Super Bowl winners by 2027 season. So that'll do it for this episode of the Bleeding BnG podcast, guys. Thank you guys for checking in. It's our time to shine, the off season, and we're going to be tapped into all of this news. We have a lot of news. It was a news dump for the Washington Commanders today, and I think that's how the next couple of weeks are going to be. So stay tapped into the channel. Hella content. We're going to be boots on the ground, looking at these GM searches, looking at these head coach searches, and yeah. Looks like we're on the road to an exciting offseason. Thank you guys for checking in this episode. I'll tap in on you guys later. Peace.